Well, welcome one and all. Thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon. I'm Junot Diaz.
And I am Gish.
It's a great pleasure. Because of my eyes, I'm going to be reading off of my iPhone. So I'm not actually tweeting or anything. You can adjust the font.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot, I'm streaming How to Catch a Murder.
It's a great pleasure to just share a stage with you, Juno. I mean, of course, I so respect and admire your work, as does the world. But I will say that, it has kind of a particular meaning for me. I think that, there's a part of it that I appreciate, maybe in a way that's a little different than other people. And that is just the freedom of it. I think that we both have that immigrant background. And we're aware that we kind of ride into this immigrant wind, which is not a friendly wind. It's a wind about, what you're supposed to be saying and what you're not supposed to be saying. And I just so admire your ability to just go straight into that wind and ride through it. It's really a remarkable thing. In any case, since we're talking about reading each other's work, I thought I would try to represent to you all what it is that I hear when I read Junot's work, because I read it, as everyone else reads it, but also I can hear all those immigrant voices saying, like, he said what? And so I thought I would represent that through the voice of a Chinese grandmother who is reading this first story from This Is How You Lose Her. This is The Sun, the Moon, the Stars. If any of you know my short story, who's Irish, you may recognize his voice. And this Chinese grandmother, let's just say she does tell it like it is. So here she goes. She goes, he say, I am not a bad guy. He even know how that sound. Defensive, unscrupulous, he say. But still he say, it is true. I am like everybody else. Weak, full of mistake, but basically good. Ha! Of course Magdalena disagreed. She say he is typical Dominican man. A suckio, something like that. In English, that means asshole. That is because many months ago, when Magda still his girl, he cheat on her with that chick. It's tons of so-called 80s freestyle hair. Of course, he did not tell Magda about it either. Of course not. A smelly bone like that, better off buried in the back of your life, he say. And that is true. Magda, he say, only found out because some homegirl wrote her a fucking letter, he say. That is the kind of mouth he have. And the letter have detail, of course, because what good is the letter without detail? Shit, you wouldn't even tell your boy's drunk, he say, and that is true too. But she is tell it like it is, which is the subject of this panel. The thing is, he say, that particular bit of stupidity had been over for months. He and Magda actually on the upswing. Freeze was over, she coming over to his place, and instead of hanging out with his knucklehead gang friend, they were going to see some nice movie. Driving to different places to eat. Even caught a play at the crossroads. Takes a picture with some bigwig black playwrights. You would be surprised these days, even black people can write plays. He say, she is smiled so much you would think her white-ass mouth was going to unhinge. As if that is the way to talk about your girlfriend. They were a couple again. They were visiting each other family on the weekend, very nice. Eating breakfast at the diner, rummaging through the New Brunswick library, he say, a nice rhythm they had going. But then the letter hit, like a Star Trek grenade, detonate everything. Suddenly her folk want to kill him. Never mind, he helped them with their taxes 2 years in a row. And that he mowed their lawn. Which actually he is right, they should remember. His father called him an asshole on the phone. That is not right either. He sounds like he is strangling himself with the cord. You no deserve I speak to you in Spanish, he say, and that is terrible. The poor narrator see one of Magda's girlfriend at the Woodbridge Mall, Clarabelle, the Equatoriana. Maybe that has something to do with Tropicana. With the biology degree, I don't think is PhD. And Chinita eyes, I think that is maybe so-called ethnic slur. She treat him like he ate somebody's favorite kid. And You don't even want to hear how it went down with Magda. Like a 5-train collision, he say. Terrible. He threw that other girl Cassandra's letter at him, but missed, so it landed under a Volvo, meaning a car nice, not as nice as a Mercedes, but still very nice. And then she sat down on the curb and started hyperventilating. Oh God, she wailed, oh my God. That is when his friends would claim they pulled a so-called total fucking denial. Cassandra, who? But this narrator, he is too sick to his stomach to even try. Meaning he know when he is guilty and should say sorry. So he sit down next to her, he grab her flailing arm, say some dumb shit like, you have to listen to me, Magda, or you won't understand. And here's the funny thing. Even though I think he is defensive and unscrupulous, I think, okay, I listen. Maybe he really is weak and full of mistake, but basically good. Maybe.
Gish was worried. She was like, oh my God, are you okay with me reading it this way? It's a great honor and pleasure to have anyone with such enormous talent take your work and play with it. After all, it's what matters most about it. We were talking on the phone for a few minutes, and I was telling Gish, it's what I always feel about my work. And I learned this from the writers that I had met when I was younger and who I'd read, but the nature of the book is always that once I finish or the author finishes writing the book rightfully only belongs to its reader. There's nothing an author can say to a reader that can get between them and their book. And I think that that's very, very important. I was always taught that every single book comes with a blank final chapter, and that blank final chapter is written by the reader. And everybody's book is theirs, personalized, different. So I kind of love listening to your final chapter. It's such an honor. My reading is going to be pretty straightforward, but there's a kind of an important artistic and sentimental value for me. It's when I wrote my first novel, it took a very long time to write it, but while I was writing this novel, I was reading typical American Gishen's first novel, and I would read it just compulsively. I would finish it and then start again, and finish it, start again. And so kind of in honor and in sort of the way I kind of marked in the text how important that book was to me, that I cribbed the opening lines of the book to use in one of my key chapters in my novel. There's this part in my first and only novel where we start talking about the mother character, and it actually references directly the lines that typical Americans opens with. And they're very important to me. The book and Gish's work were essential for me because as you can imagine, all of us are looking for allies when we're artists. The same way when you're a student and you're at school, you're looking for allies in this kind of intellectual journey. And Gish was a tremendous ally of mine. I could never have finished my work without her. And so part of me being here is sort of the debts that are owed that can never be repaid. I always feel we owe so much to those who write better than us that we could barely keep up with the interest. So part of the interest is just this slight reading. And my eyes, if they fail me, forgive me. And this is the opening from Typical American. And you can, again, if I had my book here, I would read it side by side so you can see how I just jack the lines. But it begins like this. It's an American story. Before he was a thinker or a doer or an engineer, much less an Imagineer like his self-made millionaire friend Grover Ding, Ralph Chang was just a small boy in China, struggling to grow up his father's son. We meet him at age 6. He doesn't know where or what America is, but he does know already that he's got round ears that stick out like the side view mirrors of the only car in town, his father's. Often he wakes up to find himself tied by his ears to a bedpost, or else he finds loops of strings around them to which are attached dead bugs. Earrings, his cousins laugh. His mother tells him something like, "It's only a phase." This is in Shanghainese. After a while, the other boys will grow up, she says. He should ignore them. Until they grow up, he thinks, and instead, more sensibly, walks around covering his ears with his hands. He presses them back, hoping to train them to bring him less pain. Silly boy. Everyone teases him except his mother, who pleads patiently. That is not the way, she frowns. Are you listening? He nods, hands over his ears. How can you listen with your hand over your ears? He shrugs. I'm listening. Back and forth until finally irked, she says what his tutor always says. You listen, but don't hear. Distinguishing the way the Chinese will between effort and result. Verbs in English are simple. One listens. After all, why should a listening person not hear? What's taken for granted in English, though, is spelled out in Chinese. There's even a verb construction for this purpose. Tiang dai jing in Mandarin means one listens and hears. Ting bu jiang means one listens but fails to hear. People hear what they can, see what they can, do what they can. That's the understanding. It's an old culture talking. Everywhere there are limits. Al's Ralph, who back then was not Ralph yet, but still Yi Feng, intent on the peak, already knew. His mother wheedles, patient again. No hands on your ears during lessons, okay? As if you have trouble enough. As it is, you have trouble enough. If he stops, she promises, she'll give him preserved plums, mooncakes, money. If he doesn't, do you realize your father will beat me too? Lazy, says his father. Stupid. What do you do besides eat and sleep all day? The upright scholar, the ex-government official, calls him Fang Tong, a rice barrel. He has an assignment for his son. Yi Feng will please study his older sister. He will please observe everything she does and simply copy her. His older sister, Yi Feng, calls her Bai Zhao, know-it-all, blushes. Hands over his ear, Yi Feng presses, presses, presses. That's it.
You know, I can't tell you what an extraordinary experience I am having right now. To hear Junot reading these words that I wrote so many years ago. And, I think that, there's been a lot of talk about, why people write, needing allies, all kinds of being weird, and, how you could find your voice. And, in many ways, for me at least, I had an imagined community. The world of books was a community that I imagined, and that I imagined somehow I might belong to by writing, but it was all in my imagining, it's not something I ever thought would really become real. And suddenly I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, oh my God, my words have gone on, the community is real, another person took them up, and they will kind of go on in this chain. It's just a tremendous honor. And for those of you who are writing, I cannot tell you what it means. But also what it means, that first moment when you're putting those words down, how very improbable this seems. And I wrote those words. I was at the Bunting Institute. It was 1985. And I had never written a novel before. In fact, I had applied for the collection of stories, and but I was at the Bunting Institute, which is at Radcliffe, so it was all women, or it was then, and we were going around the circle, and we were introducing ourselves, and they got to me. I was the youngest fellow, and I said, I was a I identify myself as a would-be writer. And all these older women jumped on me and said, you can't say that, you know? And so I actually know the moment, the first time I ever called myself a writer was on Monday of my first week at the Bonting Institute. And on Friday, I thought, I was just infected by all this ambition around me. I thought, I'm gonna write a novel. And I sat down and I wrote those words. It's an American story. And so I can't tell you what it means to suddenly hear them coming out of Junot's mouth. And I wrote those words, it was just, at the time, it was a very improbable thing. We said we're gonna talk a little bit about escapes and journeys, and it's a very improbable thing that I should be writing a novel. I know it's hard to believe, but at the time, it was still believed that Asian Americans didn't write novels. And in fact, Maxine Hong Kingston, who was far and away the best known writer of an Asian American persuasion, whose book you probably know, Woman Warrior, you probably know it as a memoir. She actually wrote it as a novel. And, but the publishers said, no one, you don't write novels, so this will be a memoir. And so she published it in nonfiction, but she had intended it as fiction. I mean, and this is part of the whole immigrant thing. I mean, the idea was that people like us did not make artifice, we made artifact. And that, and even, at Radcliffe, I have to say, at the Bonting Institute, every single day, someone would say to me, but aren't you really writing immigrant autobiography? And I would say, no, I'm writing a novel, And it's interesting because I think there's a way in which typical American really announces itself very loudly as a novel in many ways. And I think it was my attempt to claim this space, to sort of say, okay, like I am doing this thing, and it is going to be called, this is a novel. In any case, for all of you who kind of sit there thinking, how could I be doing this? What am I doing? The whole thing does have a very Cinderella-like feeling. That somebody who was, like I say, who, on Monday did not have the nerve to call herself a writer, by Friday would write these lines and see this book published and...
Yeah, no, it is actually, again, being an artist in a culture like ours, with almost no subsidies, is an enormous act of faith. And if you come from a non-traditional background, whatever that might mean to y'all, but if you come from a background where there's no history of family artists and no history of support for family artists, or you come from a background where people are sort of, compulsively practical,